So here we are on day 1, 28 days, 28 quilts, 1 layer cake challenge. The layer cake that I chose is this one right here. It's got some beautiful colors in here. The fabric collection is called On Meadowlark Pond, and there was 42 10-inch squares in my layer cake. And this is the coordinating background fabric that I chose. It's part of the collection. And your first step is going to be to choose 18 squares out of that layer cake and make half square triangles out of those 18 squares. You can use any method that you like to make your half square triangles. I chose to use the method in my video where I get 8 half square triangles out of every 10-inch square of layer cake plus a 10-inch square of background. So these are the 18 squares that I chose from my layer cake package, and I have made my half square triangles and I've squared them all up to 4.5 inches. So those are your first steps. Out of those 18-inch squares, you're going to get 144 half square triangles. That makes for a pretty quick, easy quilt. So let's get started with the first layout. That was fun, but I'm not stopping there. If this were a log cabin quilt, that would be one of my favorite layouts called barn raising. I think we'll call it a bullseye. You will have 4 half square triangles left over, and this is 10 across and 14 down. Now the next step was to put a little tiny border. I usually like to have like a little tiny border in between. So I took 4 of the layer cakes and I cut them into 1.5-inch strips. So I picked 4 that were similar in color, and they are going to be my first skinny little border. So now I'm going to I think when I do tomorrow's layout, I need to put it a little lower on the board. Either that or I gotta get me a step stool. So we're not done yet. We're still putting another border on there. So now you're going to take 8 of your layer cake squares and cut them into 3.25-inch strips. Now if you choose a 3.25-inch border for our next border, you will have enough of the layer cake squares left over to do the binding. If you choose to use a 5-inch border, then you're going to take 12 of these squares, cut them in half, That will give you a 5-inch border, but you won't have enough fabric left over to do the entire binding unless you use the leftovers of your yardage for binding. So that is also an option because there's enough yardage left over to do your binding. You also, for this particular layout, you only use 140 of your 144 squares, half square triangles. So you could square these down to 3 1/4 and use them with the 3 1/4 inch. You can't very well square them up to 5 inches. So if you don't use them as cornerstones, they can be saved for another project. So there we go, except for my top wonky row, which I can't reach. That's looking pretty good. And don't forget, you can always, if you want to, use these 4 leftover half square triangles as your cornerstones on the border. Whew, that was so much fun. Look in the description underneath this video and there will be a link for the layout for that quilt. And join me tomorrow for a whole new layout. This is Kelly from Kelly's Creative Comforts, and thank you so much for watching. Bye for now. Happy sewing. Sure was easier taking it down than it was putting it up.